My name is Perry Cooper and I'm a 3D and motion graphics designer working in the advertising industry and posting animations regularly to Instagram. In this series I'm going to show you how to create this fun looping factory scene from start to finish using Cinema 4D R20, OctaneRender 2020 and After Effects for post. In this video we're finally ready to set up for rendering. I'll take you through how I set up my scene for export using render passes, including layer masks and for depth of field. We'll also export some external compositing tags to add artwork to the walls in After Effects. Finally, we'll tweak the colour settings and finalise the project. Let's get started. Okay, so the final thing I want to set up in this scene before we set up our render settings and our passes is I want to put in some object buffer tags. So what I'm going to do is add in some artwork on the walls here and probably over the top here. So I'm going to get some object buffer tags and then I'll show you how to create the masks on the fly so we can actually mask that out. So the first thing to do is to bring in a plane and to make sure that when you take it into After Effects that the axis is correct, you must change the orientation to +Z. Otherwise, when you bring it into After Effects, it will be skewed and not necessarily the correct way. So I'm just going to change the width and height on this, and this doesn't need to be exact. It's just kind of an approximation that you can then change in After Effects. But just for me, it's just a guide. So I'm going to change my width and height, and it's important that you kind of do that not for After Effects, but in here to make sure that when you move it into position, although it's not the doesn't need to be the exact right size, you want to make sure that you've always got your Y pointing up, and then when you rotate like I've done here, I want to be in the +90, not in the -90. And actually setting the width and height is just a good reminder to remind you, you know, what is your long ways and what is your height. So with that done, let's just say it's going to be there, and I might have this artwork so it kind of comes here. I don't think I'm going to go all the way over to the tube. I'll probably keep it to here. So that's that, and we'll call that one like above shutter. And then I'll bring in another plane. We'll make that +Z. And then this one, I'm just going to take all the way over to this wall here, like that. And again, I'm just going to kind of roughly get it into position. Now, you see it's just kind of like, it's so close to the wall, it doesn't know whether it's inside of it or outside of it, but that's what I want because I want to make sure that it's kind of locked on. Now, if I was moving the camera, I might want to make sure it's absolutely dead flat, but for now, for this, it's fine. And I'll call that one like, I don't know, we'll call that tunnel wall. And then I'll do one final one, and I'll call this one bridge. And let's bring this over. Might rotate this by 90 degrees. And, you know, I might put some sort of text or something on this bridge, or maybe some lines. I don't know, I'm not too sure. Mind your head, something like that. I'm just going to sit that there. That's my bridge. So now we want to make sure this is set up for our for exporting for After Effects. So I'm going to select all of these, and I'm going to add an Octane tag. Now all this is for is so that when we render, it's invisible. So I'm going to go to my visibility, and we'll take that down to 0. And then we want to add on under tags, Cinema 4D tags, we want external compositing, and we're going to create a solid. And I might just for each of these just say, right, okay, the bridge one is red, and we can set an initial size. So I know, let's just say, I'll just say 1000 by 200. Because you can change all this once you're in After Effects. I just want to make sure that I've got something that's kind of in the correct place. This one we can make blue, and I'll make that like 200. No, we'll make it like a 400 by 600, and this one I'll make green, and that one is that one there, isn't it? So we'll just call it 800 by 200, something like that. Okay, so oh, that was actually the size of that. We'll make that 800 by 200, but we can adapt that when we're in After Effects, so we'll look at that. So that's our kind of external compositing setup. Okay, so we go to our render settings, and even though we're actually exporting our images through the render passes in OctaneRender, we need to be in the normal Cinema 4D save option. And even though I'm not actually going to save anything out from this file here, I need to give it a path so it knows how to save the After Effects compositing file. So I'm just going to call this test, and it's not actually going to save anything. And then down here under compositing project file, I want to check save, make sure it's After Effects. We want include 3D data checked, and then we can save that project file. I'll go into my AE file. I'm just going to save this as I'll call it posters, and this is going to have all of our 3D data and 3D camera that we can take into After Effects. So I'll just save that. Now if I go into After Effects, and then I can import a file, and I'm going to grab, see that posters AEC that we created, import that, and that imports a solids folder which has our 3 solids that we set up that are named, and then test, which was, remember that render file that went in that save option. So it didn't actually render anything out, but I just wanted to grab it to basically grab the data, and then this comp. So if we go into this comp, it looks a bit crazy because obviously it can't find that video, but you see we've got our three solids, and they're in the correct place. That's the most important thing for me. You know, I can I can scale this up or resize that, but I know that that's okay, that's set up for the scene. Now, a problem you might have is that you might not be able to import AEC files into After Effects, so you need to make sure you have the plugin, and that's quite easy to get if you've got obviously Cinema and After Effects. So if you go to your program files on your system, go into Maxon, and then go into Exchange Plugins, After Effects, Importer, and then either Windows or Mac, and then the latest versions are CC. So grab this file, Importer, then go into Adobe, After Effects, Support Files, Plugins, and make sure you paste it there, and then it will accept those AEC files. Okay, so let's go back into Cinema, and now we can actually start setting up this for rendering. So I'm going to go to the camera, the Octane camera tag, and the first thing I'm going to do is under the camera imager, I'm going to turn on, see the AI denoiser. So what that does, you see we have a tab that comes up here called dmain. Now you see you have a green line where it's working through the render. Then once it finishes that green line, it will then do the dmain, and I don't know if you can see the difference. So have a look at the noise that's up here. Then see here, you see it's kind of blended it. It uses AI within Octane to, smooth it out, and it does a pretty good job actually. Now I'm just using 200 samples at the moment, so if you were to render that out, you'll probably get a lot of blobbiness because between frames it's trying to work out what's going on. But if you were to render a higher amount of samples and have the denoiser on, it's kind of a nice option. You can choose to kind of blend between your main and your denoiser main, but what I like to do is actually set this up so we export a clean version, a denoised version, and then also export the undenoised version, and then in After Effects you might want to kind of maybe do a 50-50 on the two. Right, so with that being said, let's go into the render settings over here. We'll go to OctaneRender, and we'll look through the settings we've got. So I want to enable render passes under OctaneRenderer, and then I'm going to choose where I'm going to put that. So I'm going to go into footage, renders, and this is where I'm going to export everything to. I'm just going to call it factory. I want them to be EXR files. You get quite a lot of quality in these files, so I like to export as those. I'm not doing this linear, I'm doing this sRGB, but I'm going to do it 32 bits, so we've got quite a range. So we want 32 bits per channel. Compression I'm going to set to none. I want to show passes. I want to save beauty, so that save beauty is saving the version of this without the denoising on. You can have a multi-layer file that you can then split apart in After Effects. Instead of that, I'm actually going to choose folders. So it'll just make it will make multiple EXR files, one of the main, one of the denoised main, and then say our other layers that we're going to create. So I'm going to have image profile, sRGB, and tone map. So this is where you would go to linear if you want to do that option. Under denoiser passes, I'm going to check denoise beauty, so that's that denoise version that I'm talking about. And then the next option is going to be our render layer mask. So we've rendered out these object buffer tags, but what I want to do is render out some black and white images that we can use as our Luma channels in After Effects, so we can hide our image behind here. So we go over here, you can see it goes behind here, and this might go behind the bridge, and then we've got that truck that's going to come right out in front, so we can add that on now actually. So let's go to the funnel, for instance, because that's definitely right in front of it. I'm going to add on an Octane tag, and then under object layer we've got instance ID, layer ID, bake ID. So everything by default is 1, so I'm just going to set all of these to 2. Right, so the funnel layer is 2, and then the tube is there as well. So both of these I probably want to be a mask for that. I probably won't extend that across here, but if I wanted to, I could. So I'll probably get the tube, and we'll duplicate this funnel, put it on there. So we've got, again, that is instance ID of 2, and then we've got the tag that we put on the tube to kind of hide that glass, and we want to make sure that has the same instance ID as well. So let's just change all these to 2. So that's all layer ID 2. So if I go to our render settings, I'm going to check that. So it's going to render out a black and white Luma mask of just those. So then the next section is obviously the truck and the bridge, because the poster may go behind the bridge. So let's get our truck bridge. We'll add on Octane tag, and I'm going to make this free. And then I want it, so that's on the truck bridge. So then I want it on the actual bridge itself. So let's bring out down the bridge, and we'll put that on there. And then if I go to our render settings, we can check on ID free. That's cool. Right, so with that closed, let's also turn on the Z depth. So I want to put on depth of field in post, because this might take maybe a minute or so a frame, or a couple of minutes a frame possibly. Just depends on the number of samples I'm going to use, but even with only being a minute a frame, 250 frames means that's going to take a few hours. So I don't want to put on a depth of field and then realize, oh, actually I want to change it, or I want to tweak it. So we can render out a Z depth, then we can change that in post. So checking that box has brought up another tab down here. So let's check on that, and you'll see it's all just white. And that's because our Z depth max down here is too low. So we need to tweak that. So let's pull it along until we start, oh, there we go, until we start to see something. So what we're looking for is probably something like that. Let's go like, split the difference, we'll say 130. So what we're looking for is we're going from light to dark, and this lightest in the background is going to be our distance, and the darker it gets as it comes closer to us, is so that we can kind of pump that into a blur filter in After Effects, and we can set that blur so we can have it blurry in the background or the foreground, or move that around. So that's that layer done. So they're the layers that I'm planning to export. There's the there's all of our tags. So the only other thing is our Octane settings. So let's go to the kernels here. Now you can have something set up for your renderer. So you may say like, you know, in the renderer, I just want to do 50 samples. And then in your render settings, you could have an overwrite kernel setting. So in here, you could, you know, have a whole other different bunch of settings. But I think I'm just going to set it in here. So, you know, my max samples, maybe I'm going to go for like 1,000. Diffuse depth, I might take that down to 10. I might keep specular depth up at 16 because I've got all this glass in here. I've got GI clamp at 1, and then what else? And then I'm going to turn on adaptive sampling, so this can help with render times as well. The way that works is if we see this noise down here, everything's grey, but you see these items that go green. That's as it's rendering. It basically says, okay, I don't really need to concentrate on this area anymore. There's no noise there, so I can carry on. Okay, so they're all my render settings. So what I would probably do now is export this, and then I will see you in After Effects. Okay, so now that's rendered and I'm happy how it's turned out. I've got it in After Effects. So I've just imported in my EXR files of the factory that demains, that's the denoised version. And I actually decided when bringing this in that I like the look of that one. It doesn't go blobby at all, and my main one still has a tiny bit of noise in it. So I can just delete that set. So I haven't got like a bloated EXR file with multiple layers within it. I've got all these folders, so I can delete that and save the space. The other thing I did when I rendered these out was I noticed my Luma mask here of the truck with the spheres coming out the back. I had forgotten to put the tag on the spheres itself. So obviously if that was in a self-contained EXR file, everything, then you've got a problem that it contains the incorrect kind of layer. So I needed to re-render that one layer on its own. So I just want to quickly show you how to do that. So going back into Cinema, on our Octane tags, what I've done is we're doing this in a slightly different way. We're not going to render out using the OctaneRender render passes. I've turned that off. And I've just saved this as a new file called info pass. And then on the objects that I want to actually render out for my Luma, so for instance, the bridge, I've changed the object color to white. The normal or the default for the Octane tags is black. And then if you have no Octane tag on, it will render as black. So for my bridge, I've set that to white. My truck bridge is white. And then my two actual sets of balls, the spheres, they're set to white as well. So now I want to render that out as a pass just on its own. I want it to copy over the top of the set I'd already done. So to do that, I'm going to go into Octane settings. And you see here, rather than path tracing, what this was set to, setting it to info channels. And then our info channel we want to render out is the object layer color. See, because that's what we've actually got here. And then we render that out through the normal save. I've saved it as OpenEXR. I'm just copying over the top of the previous files that I'd rendered in that folder that had previously been created. So that's how I got to there. Okay. For our After Effects file, we just want to make sure we go down here to the project window, click here. Your one might say 8 or 16. We just want to make sure the depth is 32 bits. And we want to set the workspace to sRGB. So this is basically so the files that we've exported from Cinema, they're the same as the settings that we've got in here. Okay. So the next thing I want to do is start bringing in our layers, you know, to put this artwork on the walls. So I'm going to go to Import File and then grab that AEC file we created previously. Remember we had that test file that wasn't actually being rendered or used, so we can just delete that. So we're going to test. Now I don't need any of these lights. Now these may come in handy depending on what you're doing. Actually, to set the lighting, you can see how it is on the bridge square here. But I don't want that. I just want the camera and these three squares, and I'm going to paste them in over the top of my image. And then what I'll do is see, I'm going to get this above shutter. I'm going to go layer, pre-compose, and I'll just call that above shutter. And if I go into that, go to the composition settings, this is, see the size we set in Cinema, 800 by 200. Probably want it to be bigger than that because I've set up some artwork that I want to put up there. So make this like 2000 by 300. Say okay. I can delete that box. We don't actually need that. And then I can import my artwork. So these are some images that I got from the Library of Congress website. They're posters from the 1930s. I'll just show you actually where I got this Library of Congress. They're posters from the 1930s. Because they're so old, there's no rights restrictions. So I'm just going to use them in my work here. I like the way that this has been like hand painted. So I've kind of wanted to get some of that texture into my work. So I'm going to call this images. And I took that title, that work with care, that was kind of around a corner like that, and I reformatted it. So we kind of had this kind of banner, which I just think it kind of adds to the scene. We've got this kind of 30s kind of styling trucks or something. So I think it kind of fits in. So so here it is up here, and we can move it around. You'll see that there's a moving point there because Cinema, when it exports, it actually gives these keyframe points because you may be actually moving the camera or something, but we're not moving anything. So I'm just going to delete all of those, and then that will allow me just to kind of shift these around. So I will scale this a little because we're quite big, and I'm just going to position this where I want that to kind of sit. And then I'll probably set that as a multiply, so quite dark over the top. And maybe I'll kind of knock the transparency back a little. So we're still going to get shadows and stuff over the top of the artwork because of the way we've applied it. So with that done, we can then grab our layer mask. I'm going to get this one here. And we can set that to Luma inverted matte, and you can see we're not showing any of the artwork through here, but because this pipe is kind of so blurry, I think we get away with it. So I don't think I necessarily need to do that, but we could render out another Luma channel if we wanted to, and then just maybe put some artwork there and then blur it out. But I think we kind of get away with it as it is. I'm deciding I'm not actually going to put any artwork on the side of the bridge, so I'm going to delete that. But I want to put this other poster here, so let's do the same thing again. Let's pre-compose, and I'll just call this poster. And just I want to keep these neat before these start getting out of hand. I'm just going to put that in a folder called comps, and put this in a folder called renders. And this test one, now we've grabbed everything from it, we can just delete that. And this is going to be our main, so I'm just going to call this factory animation. And then these I'm going to put in another folder. This is just the way I like to set up my After Effects files, in a folder called assets within the comps. So they're like asset comps. Actually, I will name it asset comps. Okay, so we've got our poster, so I'm going to go to poster, grab in our poster, and again, I might change the composition. So 400 by 6, let's just take it up a little bit. Maybe we'll call it 500. Then I'll just scale this down. It doesn't matter that this is going inside the border because what's outside is just going to be completely transparent. So let's close that, back to our master. Then I can scale this down to put a size I like, maybe like about there. Let's see what it looks like when the truck's not there. I can shift that along. And then we can bring in our other mask. And I'm going to do another Luma inverted matte. And then this poster, might set that as maybe not overlay. Let's have a look. Might set it as the hard light and then knock that back. I don't want it to kind of stand out too much. There you go. So now we've got our artwork sitting behind our truck in the scene. And the balls didn't actually cover it in the end, but, you know, at least we were covered. And then, you know, you could duplicate that poster. And because we're on the right perspective and we've got the right camera, oh, what I should delete is those points. I want to make sure to delete it in here in case we move it. We don't want the poster moving around. You know, you could duplicate that. We know it's on the same plane. Position it wherever you wanted to. So that's that. So with that being done, let's go back a bit. Maybe I'll knock that back a little bit more actually. Yeah, like that. It kind of looks like maybe it's been painted on and then it's faded. Maybe I'll just shift it up. That's just kind of, we've got a bit more of that corner coming out. Okay, so I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to use my this Z depth and bring that in. So we've got our depth of field, and what I want to do is bring in a color correction and a levels, and I'm just going to really crank this so we've got a more definitive white to black, and then I'm going to hide that, and then I'll bring in a layer, adjustment layer, and I'm going to call this DOF, depth of field, and make sure that's underneath the depth of field because we want to basically refer to the depth of field, so we don't want the depth of field underneath the depth of field layer. I'm going to go to Effect, Blur and Sharpen. I'm going to bring in a camera lens blur. That gives us an overall blur. And if I turn on Repeat Edge Pixels, that just cleans it up at the edges. Now, what I want to do is under Blur Map here, for our layer, I'm going to pick our Z depth map. And now we can change, where are we? Here, this blur focal distance. So now we can actually move this and we can move where we want to focus. We can focus on, focus on the back, bring it forward. So I'll probably make our main focus kind of this sort of area. You just tweak that. What I like to do is just kind of really whack up the blurring just so I can make sure I'm definitely focusing on the right area. Yeah, so maybe like, yeah, so this truck here. Then I'm going to take this down to maybe like 20. Yeah, we turn that on and off. It's kind of subtle, but it just gives us a little bit more depth in our scene. So I'll save that. Okay, and then I'll bring in, I'm going to duplicate that layer, bring this down the bottom, and I just want to change the coloring of our actual background render. So I'm just going to call this color, then effect color correction. I'm going to get a Lumetri color, and under basic correction, this is where I'm just going to play with these tone here. So you know, we can play with the exposure. We've got kind of quite a lot of give in it. So I'm just going to brighten it up a tiny amount. Maybe up that contrast. We take blacks. Too much. Here we go. See what it looks like when our truck comes out. I don't want this highlights to be too bright. Bring those blacks up. Just kind of like tweaking. I'm not doing a ton. Take those blacks down a bit more. I'm doing very basic, so I was kind of near the look I wanted already in Octane, so I'm just kind of tweaking what I already had. Let's turn that on and off, see what that looks like. Yes, I think I'm happy with that. Then I'm going to duplicate that again, bring that to the top, above our DOF there, and and I'm going to call this one temp. And I'm going to reset this telemetry, and on this one I'm going to set the temperature, but I want to set the temperature overall because obviously I want to affect our artwork as well. You see we can actually change everything. I'm just going to kind of bring up the warmth a little bit to make our scene a bit more yellow. But that's it. What I might do, the only thing I might do, and you might see it in the final render, is I may go through this process once more and just maybe render out a couple of different shots, because now we've got everything set up. We've got all our loops set up and our materials and lighting. We just move the camera around and just have a few other angles just to make use of all the work we've done. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial series. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and stay tuned for new videos.